I can only attest to what I see and what I know. The jury is mean mugging, super bad, no McLovin. The crowd is in hush mode, ears open to the answer, and the judge is taking notes, right hand on the hammer. The cop got his hands clasped. He was caught Diesel with a 45. He was twiddling his thumbs with a no BS sort of smile. The plaintiff's patience is draining. Anticipation awakens because justice needs to be served and the defendant is shaking. The prosecutor proceeds with her accusations. We have proof of your connection to the murder. As she paces, an agent enters the room with a clear bag of bullet shells that she plans to persuade the jury that this weapon was used to kill Mr. Mason. An analyst of one of the fastest growing banks in the nation truthfully stated Mr. Mason was a recipient of 2 degrees. Success grew to be as he bloomed with speed. Haters were doomed to be left behind this young ambitious man from Powder Springs. But what did he do to get sparked in the driver's seat of his Audi 3? He was headed home to kiss his kids that by now were probably sound asleep. He sent the wife flowers to apologize for working 80-hour weeks. The power was on, but the bed is cold because a man is organized and the boss is cheese. He kept saying things would change, but talk is cheap. So apparently, this is how the story goes. There were no witnesses present, so no one really knows, but skid marks were found on level 3 of the parking deck that matched the tires on the Jeep that swerved right into an accident. No one was injured, but when the cops showed up, they got curious. They got a call from one of the janitors about shots being fired. They investigated the Jeep and they found a pistol in a towel plus blood splatter stains on the right rim and tire. That's when they brought the driver in for some questioning. And he swore he drove reckless from being drowsy on his medicine. He'd been prescribed pills for migraine because the stress of work caused ailments that stretched a wide range. He was constantly persecuted by his boss about deadlines and time frames. But what good is a pill if you're not sane? And what's the point of working if I'm not paid? And what's the point of flirting if I'm not laid? And he goes on and on and on and on about life. The frustration of his past has aggravated his asthma. So the cops took him to a medic and he spazzed out in the lobby. His heart was beating uncontrollably as suddenly he was surrounded by bright lights and white coats, IVs and stethoscopes. Then his lungs collapsed. And what 2 hours ago was a perfectly healthy man was suddenly on the verge of passing. And while the body of Mr. Mason is being transported to the morgue, the only lead that the cops have in the murder is just about breathless. As if pulling the trigger became a death wish. But he's still conscious. Just enough to remember the plot that he mapped out. That clip that he unloaded into that Audi as it backed out, possibly facing prison homies wishing that he would just black out. But the medications did their job. Now I told you. I can only attest to what I see and what I know. The jury is mean mugging, super bad, no McLovin. As an audience member on the day of court, what I'm about to tell you, you probably won't believe, but that's poetry. It's totally truth with potency, so just roll with me. Mrs. Mason has her kids when the phone rings. The cop takes her phone because you can't take a call in court, woman, duh. But she said it was important. But the cop wouldn't budge, so the judge called recess and she thanked God above. She quickly grabbed the hands of her daughter and her son with their shirt collars soaked from the tears that have run. They were stiff-arming the media, and the family makes it into the waiting room. A bathroom break for Mr. Mason Jr., a 12-year-old who just lost his dad. He looks in the mirror with a bald fist. He said, Jesus, if you're really real, man, you gotta tell me, what's the meaning of all this? And then he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around and saw a strong man. Body glowing like a summer solstice, and some way he knew it was an angel, and in no time all of his tears were wiped dry. Because the angel said, do not fear, man, your dad's fine. And if no one believed in God's power, they will now. See for yourself, the funeral home is on the other line. That's right. Tracy's on the phone with a mortician who was stricken with awe, and no physician can condemn what he saw. He keeps telling himself that his vision is flawed because Mr. Mason is risen with no restrictions at all. In an upright position, he stood over the stall to dismiss an emission of urine that he'd been holding too long. He washed his hands and offered to give the suit back to the owner, but considering his condition, he just left with it on. He called a cab and made his way to municipal court. The miracle's inexplicable, leaving Mr. Mason trapped in a daze, but he came to when the driver asked for his pay. This is that awkward moment when you make eye contact with somebody who you owe money to, And I'm flat broke. God. So Chris says, look, sir, I once was dead, but now I'm alive. Pull out your phone. My murder case is probably streaming live. He wasn't lying. The reporters were briefing the crowd. Do you believe me now? That's when the driver said, well, how are you sitting here talking to me? I mean, are you dead? Are you not? Are you supposed to be? Chris is like, yeah, but I've been graced with a second chance. I met Jesus, and when I saw all of my wrongs, he looked at me and he stretched out his hand, and with fire in his eyes and a heart full of love, it was coupled with an embrace that I've never known. He commanded me to show the same grace that I've been shown, and it's my obligation in response to his patience. So I'm asking you for grace so I can talk to the man who's being sentenced here. My mission is forgiveness no matter how hard the decision is. The driver's left hand on the wheel is now trembling. He began to part his lips, but they started quivering. And then he musters up the strength within. Not before you tell me more about this Jesus. And within minutes they were praying to the King of Kings, all-knowing, all-sufficient, never in need of anything we have to give. There is none before or after him. And my man Chris is in the street turning up over a new believer. Woo! The doors open to the courtroom. I was wondering why I heard screams and shouts. The judge has just been seated and the crowd is tripping because the Mason family is nowhere to be found. They left the scene. Headed to the morgue. But when they got there, the owner was still on the floor. Her husband's casket was totally spotless, so Tracy hops in her car and she slams the door. Dashes home, but no sign of him anywhere. So back to the courthouse. But before she could get out of the neighborhood, she gets a collect call from a payphone on Idlewood. Baby, it's me. I can't explain everything that has happened. Just please give me a second to get inside of this courtroom and I'll see you later. I'm coming home for dinner and I want your famous spaghetti the same way that you always make it. Tell my children that I love them and I'm going to see them soon. And tell them Jesus is real, man, and I'm the living proof. She said, I know. And she turned the car around. She put the car in the garage, changed clothes, grabbed a pot, and didn't make a sound. But her spirit was overwhelmed. She turned the TV to channel 12 and made room for her kids on the couch. Now I'm standing in the third row, 15 feet from something this world has never seen. A dead man was raised back to life and made eye contact with the killer and said, I don't know why you did what you did, but all you need to know is that you're forgiven. And if Jesus can change my life, he'll change yours too, regardless if this judge sends you to prison. I'm a witness. So I wonder to myself, if every day is undeserved, who am I not to forgive? Mr. Mason turns and walks out of the courtroom. The judge yells his name. Mr. Mason. And he stopped 6 feet of the exit door. He turned and said, whatever happens is your call. I did what Jesus told me to do. Now I can only attest to what I see and what I know. The jury is no longer mean mugging but confused. The crowd is in hush mode, ears open to the answer. And the judge is throwing away his notes. And now he's staring at the hammer.